Yes, that's good,
Yeah,
Roger.
okay. Fellow beekeepers, good evening and welcome to the last one in this series. Colony increase for the established beekeeper, but before then, just a couple of personal adverts. Oh, I can't even. Oh, here we go. The practical guide to beekeeping, which I've had out now for about 6 or 7 years, something like that. And also Dave Cushman's website, which I do mention in these webinars because I refer to them quite a bit, and I'm sure you folk do as well. So those who keep asking about Nell and Rosie, there they are. Nell on the right, Rosie on the left. Nell will be 11 in a couple of weeks. Rosie's just about 2.5. So in the title, in the established beekeeper, what is an established beekeeper? If you ask a lot of beekeepers what an experienced beekeeper is, or an inexperienced one, or a beginner, or an established one, they'll probably all give you different answers. So what I mean here is somebody that's actually started beekeeping and they are committed to it for the future. So perhaps they've been keeping bees for 2 or more winters. They know the basics, the simple sort of stuff that everybody, quite frankly, should know. Life cycles, what happens when colonies preparing to swarm, recognition of diseases, both foul broods in particular. They've got adequate equipment, and whenever they do something, they haven't got to go charging off to the local supplier or get something online or whatever. Everything is sort of planned and it's there, or most of it is anyway. Perhaps by this time they've made small amounts of increase themselves. Observation, in my book, is one of the most important things a beekeeper can have, because you need to know what's correct, and if it isn't correct, what's wrong with it, and also to spot things that will help you manage the colony. Lateral thinking is also incredibly important, I think, because you need to know what you're doing today, what's going to happen to that particular colony in 2 days' time, 5 days' time, 9 days' time, or next inspection, or whatever. And it's something that's almost impossible to teach, but you pick it up by getting your head stuck into a beehive. You probably need to know how the bees will react to some of the things you do. Okay, what you do, let's say tomorrow, if the weather's perhaps not particularly good, or on the other hand it's very good, the bees might behave differently in a week or a couple of weeks' time, or next year. So you need to know how they should react and the possible variations. You also need to know what you can get away with too, and some of the things you can get away with when there's a nectar flow on, you very definitely can't get away with when there's a nectar dearth. And I think an established beekeeper has probably made many mistakes, but the key is that they've actually learnt from them. So why would established beekeepers make increase then? Perhaps they want more colonies, so they've actually planned for the increase. Perhaps it's to make up for winter losses. Perhaps it's to provide somewhere to get queens mated rather than in large colonies, or perhaps disposal for other beekeepers, help other beekeepers out, or perhaps their own sale, because as I think I said before, there's getting quite a significant number of beekeepers now who really aren't particularly interested in honey. Well, you can always make up increase from bees. Well, then why not just sell bees to get some return on your investment? Or perhaps you might make increases for management purposes, perhaps in your own apiary, or perhaps if you are involved in something like a queen rearing group, a sort of specialist group anyway, or perhaps local beekeeping association. Now you may well make have different reasons for making up increase. Now, the previous BIBBA webinars that Nick mentioned have covered various methods of increase for the small scale beekeeper that perhaps just wants 1 or 2 increase a year. But I consider they're still relevant for the established beekeeper. Even though you've got 20, 30, 50, or 100 colonies, very often you might just want to make up 1 or perhaps 2 nucs. So really, probably what you'll be doing is tweaking certain methods to suit your own particular situation. There's very often opportunities offered to us in beekeeping, sometimes at short notice. Take something like a swarm. If you're on the swarm collectors list and you hadn't really planned to have a swarm, but you take one to help the public out, don't know what to do with it, all of a sudden you're presented with increase. Now, there may be a little bit of repetition between this webinar and some of the others. I'll try and keep it to a minimum because there are recordings of the previous ones and you can refer to them. There's a couple of things that that I can think of where there's repetition. So I'll keep that particular part to the minimum. Now, I've got to assume that the attendees in this webinar, bearing in mind they're established, may need more extra colonies than those in the early years. Planning and preparation, I think, are incredibly important in beekeeping. I know there's a lot of people that sort of do things on the hoof, but if you plan and prepare, I think you'll get get better rewards. I'll suggest perhaps at the beginning of the year, you need to know how much increase you want, whether it's 2 colonies, 5 colonies, 10, 20, or whatever. Okay, up and down a bit, perhaps 25%, absolutely no problem at all. Because we've got to work around the weather, we've got to work around perhaps work or all sorts of things like that. And just because you say I'm going to make 23 extra colonies this year, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to. Whoops. So you need to be quite flexible in what you're doing, especially if perhaps you end up with more of somebody else's swarms than you're going to. You obviously need something to put them in, so make sure that you've got enough nuc boxes and full boxes before the event. Not that you're rushing around with a swarm up a tree, or there's a colony preparing to swarm and you want to split it into 3. It's too late then to rush around. I've mentioned the polystyrene versus the wood debate because I think it's quite important. If you're going to buy extra equipment, I think you need to buy what is going to suit you. Personally, although I thought poly hives and nucs when they first came out, I thought they were really good. I've really gone off them. At Whisper Green Teach in April, we've got about a dozen of them, and I'll obviously keep them because people can see what they're like and use them. But I have to say they are not my favourite by a very long way. Don't forget you need frames and foundation. Frames won't deteriorate. You can keep them in a pack so they don't take up much room. Foundation needs a little bit more care, so just keep it flat. And drawn comb, which those of you who either know me or have been involved with the other webinars will know that I like to have quite a lot of drawn comb if I possibly can. You of course need bees, and we'll work something out on that later. And of course, with increase, you need queens as well. And again, we'll be doing a little bit on that. It may well be that you've got an out apiary if you've got several colonies. It surprises me the number of people with perhaps 10, 15, 20 colonies, and they got bees in 3 or 4 different places, like 2 here, 3 there, and that sort of thing. Well, that could be handy for making up nucs, because you take them to another of your apiaries, and you haven't got to worry about the bees flying home. That's if they're further than 3 miles away. So, a tiny bit about my beekeeping. I work on single brood nationals, summer and winter, and have done for a very long time. And the reason I can do that is because I use non-prolific queens. I haven't got queens that lay wood to wood brood. So what I'm going to tell you is based on that. But if you have got double brood chambers, brood and a half or whatever, you may need to tweak what I tell you to suit. There shouldn't be too much difficulty. Now, if you have got very prolific bees, sometimes they just turn food straight into brood, and of course you may need to feed them during the summer, where the non-prolific bees in general, there's absolutely no problem. So what are our options for increase? Obviously swarms. In fact, I'm hoping there's somebody listening tonight who collects a lot of swarms and does a lot with them. In my view, there's nothing really wrong with them if you're sharp about the condition of them, because more than 20 years ago, if you collected a swarm and it had a fertile queen, if you just chucked it in a box, if it's early in the season, give it a super or two, and walk away and leave it until the end of the year. You cannot do that now, because there are so many of them that have got failed queens, or they become drone layers, or they very, very quickly supersede. So you need to be a little bit alert to them. Also, of course, you could put out bait hives, and surely it's better to have a swarm come into your bait hive than either yours or somebody else's chimney. On combs is probably going to be the favourite. That'll of course involve splitting colonies. You could buy bees. I don't really see the point in that. If you've got one colony, then you very definitely don't have to buy bees. And as a long-term auctioneer at the West Sussex beekeeping auction, I've been told that I've been auctioneer for over 30 years now. It amazes me the number of people with 8 or 10 colonies that buy bees at auction, and I ask them why they buy and say, "Oh, mate, I've lost 2 or 3 colonies or whatever it is during the winter," and they really do not know how to increase colonies. I find it amazing. Anyway, I'd avoid buying bees, because it's fun producing your own. You know what they are. If you can produce your own queens to go with them, it really adds to the enjoyment of the craft, in my opinion. It's well known that I like to get brood combs drawn out above the excluder in a brood box used as a super of that. And as I've mentioned before, there are benefits. You get much better combs. You've got food combs if needed. The good comb is instantly available to the queen, so she can lay it out quickly. Therefore, a much quicker build up in your increase, whatever that is, whether it's a full colony or a nuke. Also, if you put drawn comb into the colonies that you've taken the frames of brood or food out of, it helps them recover a lot quicker. So there's a couple that were in a brood chamber used as super. That's what you end up with. You extract it, really good combs in that you can put in a nuke, and the bees haven't got to build the foundation up. So make an increase then. As I said in the last webinar, I advocate moving combs and bees between colonies. I've always done it. I know there's a few that you could be spreading disease, but surely the right thing to do is to identify disease, know what it looks like, and if you've got a problem, deal with it. Because simply by not moving things around, you're not going to, the disease isn't going to, if it's there, isn't going to disappear. Some things to remember, and it doesn't matter how many or how much increase you intend to make. It takes around about a cell of food to produce a cell of brood. Therefore, a frame of food in certain circumstances in 3 weeks can become a frame of brood, frame of bees, call it what you like. So you need to be aware of that. 1 frame of brood equals 3 frames of bees. Somebody tried to argue with me once and said they'd observed it was only 2.5 frames of bees, but then they admitted that they'd been keeping bees a year or two. So, you know, you make your mind up. 2.5 or 3 frames, that's good enough. After mid-July, let's say another week or so, any brood you've got won't collect any honey. So if you've got frames of certainly sealed brood in your main colonies, you might as well give them to the smaller nucs to get them to build up. It certainly won't won't damage the full colonies anyway. So in case I don't talk about this later on, if you make up a fairly small nuc in May, the chances are it will charge ahead and do well. But if you make up that exactly same nuc in June, of course it will be retarded by 8 weeks. So then it might need a little bit of help. So you've got several options, one of which is put more combs in there to start with, or get it set up and then just add brood as and when, and that's what I mean. So that's all the simple stuff out of the way. Now the interesting bit, queens. Personally, I much prefer queen cells for nucs. If you just got perhaps 1 nuc and you've got a spare queen, or somebody else has got a spare queen, then absolutely fine. But I tend to make up quite small nucs, and it's a little bit of a waste of a fertile queen to put her in a small nuc. They may need to be protected, but as established beekeepers, you ought to know what that is all about and how to do it. Established beekeepers should also know how to produce queens. Now, I know some don't, but I've got to assume that people listening to this know how to produce their own queens. I don't want to do anybody out of business just for the sake of it, but please don't buy, because if you use something that's been local to you and it's established in that area, it will suit your area. But if you buy something either online or a supplier or something, it could have come from Greece or Slovenia or somewhere like that with a different climate than ours, and they may not even last the winter. And it's also good fun producing queens as well. I can tell you that because I've produced quite a lot this year. So the methods of increase, there are loads and loads and loads of different methods, and then there are lots of variations of those methods as well. Even things like the vast majority of swarm control methods can end up in increase if you want it. They can also be end up in increase if you're not careful too. What I'm going to tell you about here, there's some fairly unusual ones that I've used over the years. What I can tell you is they all work because I've used them on many occasions. It's not just a case I've done something once, it works, so I'm going to tell the world about it. Somebody else thinks, oh, it's a good idea, writes about it, and so does somebody else. And if you're not careful, it's in more places than the number of times it's been tried. I'm not into that sort of beekeeping at all. You folk out there may well know more than me. because we all talk to people, we all find things out ourselves, we all you know, have chats at somebody when you go to the National Honey Show or something, and somebody says they tried something this year and it worked. You go home and it works for you. There's loads of things in beekeeping that you can pick up like that. Now, I am going to mention the two-frame nuc yet again, because it really is the mainstay of my methods of increase. But I won't go through the usual form. I'll just briefly do it. I've used it in many, many different situations. All you need is a frame of food, a frame of sealed brood with a deer in bees in a nuc box, fill it up with drawn comb, and just give it a queen cell. That's it, done and dusted. It's as simple as that. It doesn't cost very much, and it doesn't knock the stuffing out of a colony, let's say like a 5-frame nuc would. So it's nice and economical on bees. Okay, so that's basically it. If you've got a lot of colonies, you can actually make up full colonies. And I've done this on many occasions too. There are 10 colonies there. If you take bees and combs from 10 colonies, just one each, you're not knocking the stuffing out of the colonies, but you can make up one new colony, which depending on how you make it up, you can put a super on it almost straight away. Now, what you could do is either leave it in a new position, or perhaps if you've got a colony that's a bit retarded, perhaps on 6 or 8 combs, not perhaps ready for a super yet, put it in the position of that one and then move the other one away. Obviously, you need to know why it's on 6 or 8 combs, but it could have come to the winter as a nuc. You can take food from the what I'm calling here as the brood super. Absolutely nothing, no reason why you shouldn't be doing that. And then, of course, replace with comb straight away. Now, you can do this on a smaller scale if you want to. So if you've only got 5 colonies, you can do exactly the same. You can either use 2 combs, which will slightly retard the main colony, or you can just take 1 comb and make up a 5-comb nuc. Now, replacing with comb, the smarter of you will have worked out already that you've automatically changed 1 comb in each of those colonies. Also, what it's done, depending on where you put it, and depending on the year, and depending on the colony, because don't forget we're dealing with biology, which as I've said on many occasions, varies quite a bit. If you're lucky, you get a queen to lay up one of those frames more or less straight away. It takes around about 2 days for a queen to lay up a pretty standard comb. If she does it more or less at the same time, what you've got in just under 3 weeks is a frame of emerging brood, or just over 3 weeks. But if you take it out of the colony you put it in and make up another 2-frame nuc with it, within a few days, certainly within a week, you ought to have an extra 3 frames of bees. So you can make up, with a little bit of knowledge, with a little bit of gumption, you can make up colonies quite quickly. Now, this can be done every 1 to 2 weeks if you wish. So if perhaps you want to build up your colonies quite quickly, this is quite a reasonable way of doing it. I did it on one occasion I had 2 aotapiaries I'd only just started, and I filled up those within 1 summer with full colonies in this way. Now, you can make a single colony quite easily. If you just want 1 single colony, then do what I'm going to tell you. If you want a single colony on a regular basis, then follow all the way through. It's basically an artificial swarm, but it's cheating. And as I think I said on the swarming module or swarming webinar, that I've never ever done an artificial swarm for myself. I've done it for other people, but generally it's for another purpose, and this is one of them. And I've done this on many occasions. So what you do is you move the parent colony to one side. In its place, you put a nuc box, and in that nuc box, you put a 2-frame nuc and a queen cell. Now, the 2-frame nuc can come from a single colony or perhaps another colony. It really doesn't matter. The benefit of that is you're taking the combs from one colony and the bees from another. You can shake them off if you like. It doesn't really matter. Now, you've got to get your timing right on this because you're putting a queen cell in there, don't forget. She will probably emerge a couple of days or so. Now, it takes around about 5 days for virgin queens to sexually mature. I think that, well, this year I've had them quicker than that, but not to worry. So let's say that is probably normal. Now, what you don't want to do is be moving that little colony around after the queen has gone out on orientation flights. So if you move it for a couple or 3 days, usual sort of thing, 2 to 3 feet every day, it gets it away from the other colony, and make sure that the gap between the nuc and the parent colony that you've now moved, you move it less than that. So when the bees come back here, they go into there rather than moving that over to here and they come back into there. I hope you get, hope you understand that. So don't move a colony at all with a virgin queen that's likely to be on mating flights. Just don't do it. Right, so you can move it away in stages, and then with a 2-frame nuc, probably you're looking at about 4 weeks. You'll then need to put it into a full box if everything goes right, because as I said in the webinar on the 2-frame nuc, these really do explode after about 5 weeks. Then, if you want to, you can do the same again 2 to 3 weeks later. And you can actually do this all throughout the summer. So you could probably get 5 or 6 nucs of one colony during the summer, if you want to. You know, so it's entirely up to you. So you can use that method for just one single colony or a series of single colonies. There's a variation here. If you can pick up an early large swarm, put that in a box. Or if you've got 2 smaller ones, just chuck them together. If you like the look of one queen more than another, then nip out the one you don't like. If not, just let them get on with it. So let them build up. Wait till you get at least a full brood cycle, because you need the colony to be expanding, whereas a swarm, if anything, it's diminishing in numbers. So you need to be, it needs to be on the ascendancy. So then, from that swarm, and a good, I've had a good swarm in a good year, fill up, will draw out and fill up a brood chamber foundation in a week. So that's how fast, in good conditions, swarms can build up. I wouldn't feed them. I don't like feeding anything during the summer unless it's absolute desperate. If you want to feed, feed, but I don't like it. So make up your 2 frame nuc then, and then you can split the parent colony into 2 after a few days. Now, don't forget what's happened. You've moved it from there to there. So the flying bees will go back to here. So after a day, perhaps 2 days, all the bees that are in that colony aren't going to be flying back home. So then you can split them both up, knowing that you won't be losing any bees. So you can do this with a really big swarm. What it does do is it gives you a week or a little bit more, a couple of weeks, in which to assess it, 3 weeks perhaps, in which to assess it. If it looks better than anything you've got, then perhaps you use the queen. If not, just give her the boot treatment and then put in 3 queen cells in each one of those. So give each one a queen cell. Right, so what you've got then is 3 colonies at no cost, all with hopefully good queens that you've reared yourself has come from your own stock. So if you want more colonies than this, you can use any of the simpler options, just multiply it up. You can do it quite easily, but I think probably if you want quite a lot of colonies, you'll probably want to do it as efficiently as you probably can. Again, there are many methods, or many other ones. As an established beekeeper, you may have more queen cells available. Perhaps one of your good colonies is preparing to swarm, or perhaps you are raising queens yourself, and this is one of the beauties of either a local association teaching apiary or a queen rearing bee improvement group providing queen cells for members. Don't be frightened of taking something from somebody else, but make sure it's better than what you've already got, because you're not getting anywhere otherwise. Now, the Roger Patterson method. You think, oh, Roger Patterson, he's got his name everywhere. Well, it's sort of partly intentional, because I've been using the method that I'm about to tell you, or parts of it, since the 1970s, so well over 40 years. And it's really a collection of different methods that existed anyway. And the reason I gave it my name is simply because what I've done is I've pulled things together. A lot of these things that I'm about to tell you, you probably won't find in books. Some of them I've worked out myself. Some, the older beekeepers who were when I started keeping bees, the vast majority of people were practical and they sort of worked things out. They didn't necessarily know quite what they were doing, but they could actually work things out. And a lot of them were quite successful beekeepers. They didn't know how many segments were on a drone's antenna, but they certainly knew how to keep bees. Now, this particular method, you can make pretty rapid increase during the summer, and up to tenfold. I got there with a bit of cheating, and I'll tell you what the cheating's about in a slide or two. You clearly need drawn comb, and that, in my view, is a key to an awful lot of beekeeping. You also need queen cells, but that's fine, because even if you haven't got any, just take a queen away from a good colony and you've got queen cells. What I'm going to tell you, in my opinion, works much better if you do it on a good flying day with at least 2 hours left, preferably more. I like doing this during the day. The smarter amongst you will realise that this is a very, very flexible system. So what is it then? Well, you take one colony and you build it up early in the year, and we'll call it colony A. Now, when I say build up early in the year, I don't mean feed it. I mean make sure that you inspect it from probably back end of March, well, halfway through March onwards. Now, I'm talking about West Sussex. I'm not talking about Northumberland or Lampeter. Make sure that the early pollen and nectar that you very often get coming quite copiously in the spring, certainly if you get 2 or 3 or 4 days of fine weather, doesn't pack round the brood. If it does, then just move it out and put an empty comb in board on each side. What you mustn't do is retard the colony. I don't think stimulative feeding that has been used for years and years and years actually does any good at all. So, you know, it's a management thing rather than just put something in there. So it must be strong when you start. It shouldn't be building up. It needs to be strong and with a good laying queen. So if the queen is thinking about failing, then either requeen it or use another colony. Now it may be supered, and I think it's probably better if it is, because it shows at least that it's strong enough. Now in West Sussex, I can start late April or early May most years. Perhaps if we go up to Northumberland or Cumbria, perhaps not 2 or 3 weeks off that, or up in Wales. Now, when the queen cells are ready, either natural ones or artificial, and certainly once you get drones on the wing, you can usually start. So, from colony A, you make up 2 nucs, which we'll call B. I'm going to give them both 1 frame of sealed brood plus adhering bees and 1 frame of food. Now that you'll probably recognise as a two frame nuc. Now the frame of food may come from another colony, and that's where the cheating comes in. But the only reason I say it's cheating is because I mentioned that you can get 10 colonies from 1. If you actually want to do that, then this is cheating. They both need to be fairly equal in both brood and bees, and I'll tell you why in a minute, but I'm sure some of you have worked out already. Fill up with drawn comb, so typical 5 frame nuc, and after several hours, give each one a queen cell, or you can protect them if you like. It really doesn't matter. It's entirely up to you. If you haven't got the time to go in 3, 4, 5 hours later, then protect them. Fill up with drawn comb in colony A. So then move colony A aside, and in its as far as you like, it really doesn't matter. It needs to be within the same April where the flying bees are going to go back home. Now replace it with the 2 nucs, which are B, and I always reckon to put about 6 to 12 inches between the 2, no more. No more, and that will become obvious in a minute, I hope. So what happens is the bees from A will fly out, and this is why you need certainly quite a lot of a good flying day left, because you need to lose your flying bees, or most of them, from A. They go out and do the foraging, come back to where they're used to coming back to, find that colony A is gone, but in its place has got 2 entrances. What do? So they then share between the entrances, or that's the theory. It isn't always quite like that, because what happens is, and this happens in seconds, if you move the first one across, that's the one that bees come back to. They start fanning. You move the other one 10 seconds later, and you've got 30, 50, 100 bees fanning here. So that's where all the bees get drawn back to. Now, this is partly why you need a short distance between there, because if they're too far apart, they will favour one or the other. Right, now you may have to adjust, and within, well within 5 minutes, you'll get more bees probably on one than the other. That's okay, no problem. If you leave it, it will mean that one will get filled up much more than the other. So just move this over here somewhere. Give it 5 minutes. They'll still keep fanning. Bees that are coming back, the nearest colony then, or nearest entrance, is this one here. So they come back. When the two are fanning about the same amount, then move this one back here. And in my experience, it takes about a quarter of an hour, 20 minutes. And once you get them fanning equally, they should be okay. Now, I don't know if I'm going to mention this or not, so I will now. I've tried on many occasions with perhaps putting a queen in one and a queen cell in the other. The bees always favour coming back to the one with the queen in. So that's why now I just put a queen cell in both, because of not the added pheromones to confuse them. Right, so when settled, and I mean settled probably one full day, so they're coming back to their own entrances without coming back to the middle. If you've got a cool period, then not all bees fly in cool days. So you can very often have 2 quite chilly days, and then out comes the sun, and then all of a sudden the bees are flying back to the middle. So you know jolly well that they haven't flown each day. Now, move them both aside only a little bit. Don't forget, you only had a foot in between. So just move them a foot or so each way until you get them 3 or 4 feet apart. Then you can move them 3 feet or so if you like. Be careful though, because exactly the same as I told you quarter of an hour ago, as soon as you've got queens that are likely to be out on orientation flights, then stop. Wait until they started laying and then move them wherever you like. So perhaps 4 or 5 days at the most. So move them where you like. Don't matter. Once the queens have started laying, that's fine. Now you allow A to recover, which in my experience is usually 2 to 3 weeks. It does vary a little bit. Colonies vary. They're all quite variable. Certainly 2 weeks, probably 3. Then do the same again. Move it back. You can move A anywhere you like, but I tend to just have two little sites and just move them back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Mainly because you know, if I've got a paving slab or something down like that, then they've got a spare stand. In its place, put 2 nucs C. Already, you're 3 weeks or so down the line, and you've gone from 1 colony to 5. You see where the increase comes from? So put 2 nucs in there, and then you treat them exactly the same as you treated bees all the way through. So you can follow that through during the summer, and you can keep moving A every 2 to 3 weeks during the summer. Now, what do you do with B? Because they're building up, and if you remember from the 2 frame nuc webinar, after about 5 weeks, they need putting in a full box. So put them in a full box. They will build up very quickly. So allow them to build up. Now you can do exactly what you like with those. If it's very early in the season, if you don't want to increase, you can super those. Oh, perhaps I ought to say that at this point, you can stop here if you want to. But if you do need extra increase, just keep going. So all the bees, you then need to work out what you're going to do with them. In the meantime, you move C away because you're going to move A back in 2 to 3 weeks time. Now B will probably be after 6 weeks or so, could be in a position where they could be split themselves. You can do that any way you like, really doesn't matter. If you do remove combs from them, replace with drawn comb because they will recover that much quicker. There really are loads of variations. If you wanted to, you could probably split each one up into probably 3 if you want to, 3 combs, 3 or 4 combs nucleus. They will be fine. Don't forget, if it's early, it's probably still only mid-June anyway. So here is one option. You can move both of B, and in its place, I would suggest just one single nuke, because bees are still quite a bit out of balance, and they haven't retained their full balance yet, and they're probably a bit short of flying bees. So they will probably just suit one nuke. Okay. Now what it does do, it means that the bees go out from B's and come back to D, and you're not burdening A at all with this early lot, not at all. So here we are. There's 2 being made, 2 well-filled combs, and this is at our Whisper Green teaching apiary. You've got 2 here which have been made up, I would think, probably a week earlier. You can see they've moved apart. There is the stand from the parent colony, which has been moved, I don't know where, into the distance somewhere. So you've got 2 nukes there that could be moved 3 feet or more a day to the rest of the apiary. In the background there, I'll just mention a lot of nukes. They're our queen rearing nukes, and that's for the queen rearing we do. But there's also going to be a surplus of queen cells. So these queen cells can be used ideally for these little nukes. You could, if you wanted to, use a queen, but it's better, in my opinion, if you have queen cells. So in 2018 at Whisper Green teaching apiary, I got so fed up going around speaking to other associations, and they were saying that they can't produce enough nukes for their beginners. And I was coming across associations who are buying in commercially 50 nukes for their beginners and members who want them. Certainly another one buying 35. Now, surely that's what a teaching apiary is all about, to teach people how to do things themselves, isn't it? Anyway, that's not for me to criticise them. But they were saying they can't produce enough. So I'd been doing this for, like I said, 40 some odd years. So we did a demonstration in the year for this method. It resulted in 11 colonies that were strong enough to go into one winter out of one colony that came out of last winter. There could have been more, and I'll explain why. So this is the little corner that we took. You don't need very much room. There is a parent colony there, which had just been moved from over here somewhere. And there would have been 2 nucs placed on the previous stand. So it would go over there, wait a couple of 3 weeks, and then it will be split up again. Oh yeah, so yeah, let me just go back. Yeah, these are all nucs that have been made up, and as I say, you really don't need very much space at all. What you need to be careful of is that these have quite often got virgin queens in, so you want to keep it away from your main apiary. Because if you're there as, let's say, a marker, when queen comes back from mating, she could well go into the wrong hive, mistake you, go into the wrong hive and be slaughtered. So, yeah, one thing you can do is that these outer 2 have got strong. Rather than put them in full boxes, bring them close together like I have there, or like we have. Put in the center an empty box. I suggest this was fairly late in the season, so probably into July when we did this. Take a frame of brood and food from each one of these, make up the nuc there, and give it a queen cell. Fill it up with drawn comb and fill up the gaps with drawn combs. Then these outside nucs move away, needn't be far, 6, 8 feet, doesn't matter. So the flying bees will come out of these wherever they are into the one in the middle. On the 9th of July, this is what we had, 2018. So 9th of July, which is what? It's the 9th. No, it's the 8th of July today. So about now. So there's still 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, depending on where you are, of the summer left. See what we've got. Whoops. Yeah, see what we got. That is the parent colony that's been moved back. Notice it's still got 2 supers on. So that's the parent colony. These 2 have been put into full boxes, and then all these others have been made up. Now you'll see there's 2 in the back there. I think 2 slides ago I showed you this colony over there. It had obviously just been moved, and in its place we've put 2 nucs. So that's what we do. Here I suggest what might be happening. Oh, that box is there. So I think probably what's happened is these have been moved away, and that was the last slide. That one there. But the outside one's been moved away. So you can see you can build this up quite quickly. On the 22nd of August 2018, we'd got 11 colonies, all strong enough to overwinter. Here they're brought together because we didn't want to put them all through the winter because we're just getting too many colonies. So we put them together, look like that, and perhaps that's a pair, that's a pair. And the reason is, if our members want queens, we just take one out of here and then unite them. So at the end of the season, you can bring the numbers back down if you like. So in 2018, we'd actually made 13 nucs. 3 of them, unfortunately, had failed queens. But if you do get a failed queen, don't worry about it. Just give it another frame of sealed brood with the bees shaken off, give it another queen cell, and all it does is puts it back a couple of 3 weeks, that's all. We decided not to do that. Now, the parent colony had a queen disappear in June. Now, disappearance is one of the queen problems that I've been talking about for the last 20-some odd years. Again, being established beekeepers, you all ought to know about it. If not, have a look on Cushman's website at Queen Problems. What it did do is gave us probably an 8 or 10 days a brood break. So of course it threw the brood cycle out. So it delayed us a little bit. Now that parent colony produced. Don't forget we've got oilseed rape, so we get 2 extractions. It produced a box of brood comb. Overall, for the whole of the year, 80 pound of honey and 11, but it could have produced 14 colonies strong enough to go into the winter. Now, I gave this part of the talk as part of something, an all-day event down in Kent a year ago, I think last February. A lady in the audience was a commercial beekeeper. She sold dukes, and she just openly said, do you realise at my rate, that's £2,300 worth of nucs just from one colony. Plus you get 80 pound of honey, plus a brood comb. So you can, even with non-prolific bees in a single brood box, you can do an awful lot with them. I reckon that's pretty successful. The method I've just shown you is on Dave Cushman's website, and it's in a printable PDF, so you can print it off if you want it. Please feel free to do so. Now, I am asked why I use sealed brood, and it's quite important. It does generate its own warmth, where unsealed brood doesn't. It needs a lot less bees to look after it. So if you do have a bit of a mishap and more flying bees go home and you were catered for, then it's probably not going to be quite such a disaster as if it was eggs and larvae. The great thing about it is it's been fed. So it doesn't need feeding. So it's not a burden on the colony. So the frame of food you put in will probably last that colony certainly a fortnight, 3 weeks if the weather turns bad. And of course, when it emerges, together with the other 3 frames of drawn comb you put in there, you've got laying room for the new queen. Now the really clever bit that nobody else has ever thought of. Right, I guess you all recognise that piece of equipment. It's a wheelbarrow, and it's surprising the number that get thrown away that, you know, there's a hole or something in the pan. What you got to do is take the pan off, load it in the back of your car, take it out for a drive, dump it in somebody's gateway when it's dark. That leaves you the chassis, which with a few bits of wood that somebody else might have dumped in the same gateway, you can make up a little platform like that. You can then put on it the colony that you keep moving, and you've got a mobile colony. How's that, folks? Anyway, that's it. That's all from me, and the dogs now can answer any questions you've got. So thanks very much indeed. Okay, Nick.
Right, Roger, thank you.
Cool. No, another one will spot on at 8 o'clock.
No,
you didn't think I could do it.
Several people have asked why you don't like using polyhives.
Polynucs. Right.
Well, you mentioned polyhives first of all.
Yeah.
So
it was in the context was actually nukes, so Nick, wasn't it?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. I'll mention polynukes then. Right. They're supposed to take 6 frames, but they'll only take 6 newish Hoffmans on which are narrower spacing than what I call British spacing. You certainly won't get 6 plastic ends in them. They're really tight. So what I do now is I just put 5 frames in them and a division board. I say division board because that's what it is. I know people call them dummies, but it's a different thing. So that's what I do. There's one make that have got the area where the lugs go is flat. So the bees propolize them up really well. You then go and try and loosen the comb off, and you start ripping off the material, polystyrene material. That's another problem. I think if you have poly nucs, you ought to buy some slug pellets, because the slugs absolutely love climbing inside them in my experience. One of the major problems is that they're too deep by at least an inch. And even yesterday, I was carving great lumps of comb off the bottom of frames, simply because, there's, yeah, I've got my, 1.5 inches on the bottom, I should think. The material they make them out of is very soft, so you can't scrape propolis off like you can a wooden box. I'm sorry, I've got about a dozen of them, and personally I don't particularly like them, but beekeeping is one of those things that some people like some things, some people like something else.
Okay, thanks. Right, somebody obviously doesn't realise you've got a very odd sense of humour and pointed out that dumping a barrow is illegal.
Sorry?
Dumping the wheelbarrow top is illegal.
Yeah, of course it is.
Okay.
Well, okay, then knock on the door and ask them if they'd like it.
Okay. Someone says...
What want somebody in the police force, was it?
Well, they were anonymous, so they probably were. Okay, you made a comment that brood doesn't collect honey after mid-July. Could you explain that?
Right. If you have an egg laid in a cell today, it takes 3 weeks to emerge, and roughly 3 weeks before it forages. So you've got 6 weeks in order to collect. So in many places, second week in August, the forages stop. Come back 3 weeks from that, or perhaps a little bit more. You're into sort of 3rd week in July, aren't you?
Okay.
Well, are you understanding what I'm saying?
I'm understanding.
Right. Okay. Well, if you do, surely everybody else will.
Okay.
Go on, Nick. Give us a grin.
Right. Okay, we've got another question here. Somebody attended your lecture last year, has done some grafting, got 6 taken, and they want to get them mated in apideas. Would you simply introduce the queen directly or through a queen cage? Introducing
in apideas. Right. How long have you got? If you want to set up an apidea for queen rearing, just 1 round of queen rearing, I don't think I'd bother, because I think apideas are the sort of thing that really needs to be run throughout the year, so you've got succession, because you need to get them into the right condition to be efficient, in my view. I haven't used any this year. I did last year. I haven't used any this year at all. I've just used straight 2 Frame Nucs, because I've got something that's useful. But hang on, if they've got 6 apideas, then they're quite a serious beekeeper, aren't they? I would think. Did you say 6 apideas they got?
Yes.
Oh, right. Well, yeah, the first one, I would get I would dump a virgin queen in, the very first one. And what I found is you don't have to condition them like you do if you put a queen cell in. If you put a queen cell in, they can abscond, and that's one of the reasons that you put them in the airing cupboard or the garage or whatever for 3 or 4 days, so that they sort of condition themselves. What I've found out is that you can get over that. Perhaps I shouldn't say here without sort of quantifying it a bit more, but certainly the first one round I would use a virgin queen rather than a queen cell. Once you've got brood in there, you've got something to hold the bees, and they're not going to abscond. But if you put a queen cell in with no brood, it's very likely that they will abscond. Epideas, where many nukes aren't easy to use.
Okay. I mean, it's a whole topic in itself, isn't it? So shall we move on? I've got another question here, which is probably down your street. Why has cell punching gone out of fashion as a way of queen rearing? Everyone talks about grafting, etc., but not cell punching.
Sorry, cell punching. Right. I don't know if I've. Can you read it again, please, Nick? Because
why has cell punching gone out of fashion as a way of queen rearing?
I think the answer is it never really was in fashion. It's always been sort of poo-pooed by people who prefer to graft. They seem to think that's the only method of doing it. I like cell punching. I use it a lot. I've done it 5 or 6 times this year already. There are no commercially available cell punches. Some of these other things that you see people using aren't the proper cell punching. They just punch out one cell and that's it. The proper cell punching punches out the cell and leaves the larva in the actual punch. That then is used to raise a queen cell and have the bees build the queen cells on them.
Okay. When is the latest you would make up a nuc for overwintering?
When is the latest?
You would make up a nuc for overwintering. How late in the year can you make
if you've got the queens, you can make them up as late as you like. The later they are, the bigger they need to be. And of course, it depends where the person is in the country, because Cornwall is going to be very much different than Northumberland or Cumbria or or even sort of Scotland or Lampeter. Depends where the person comes from. Certainly further up country, I don't think I'd think of making up a nuc after about the first week in August. Further south, I can make nucs up if I've got queens or queen cells up until probably the end of August. But what you've got to do, Nick, is you've got to make sure, you must make sure that the combs are well covered with bees. If you've got the brood comb and you can see brood with bees on it, normal sort of density, if you can see brood, quite frankly, I don't think they're strong enough. It seems to me that nucs lose more bees percentage-wise over the winter than full colonies do. Now, I overwintered 13 out of 13 last winter, but sometimes if I put 13, 15 into winter, I could lose 4 or 5 of them. You must make sure that you that you've got them very well covered with bees.
Okay. Now, good job you're sitting down with this one. Wouldn't you be better off using a prolific queen for your 10 hive spring build-up?
Well, I don't particularly like prolific queens at the best of times. They just need far more work, and I don't think they're really suited to our climate. Having said that, if you get hold of, let's say, a swarm with a prolific queen in, then yes, use it. Which, in fact, is what I used to do, or one of the things I used to do when I sold bees. I pick some up in swarms and just let them lay themselves stupid, producing bees, and then put other local queens with them.